As promised yesterday, unfortunately, thanks to unforeseen circumstances, I couldn't help with the basically the taping of the space. So I'm redoing it today, but with a lot more information and a lot more material. Thanks to actually a couple of things, because yesterday I basically brushed away the report from the US about the 87-90% quote, how much you want, doesn't matter, about the 87% of Russian losses of their forces pre-war. That was a funny one, but now we have another subject. First of all, we have, for the first time in a long while, a Russian confirmation of mass casualties. So for those who followed the Putin press conference, the address to the nation, he pointed out a couple of numbers. So first of all, he said a very specific number: 617,000 people in Ukraine. Those are supposed to be the Russian forces in Ukraine. I find I don't think it's in Ukraine. I think probably he said the special military operation zone, probably. But the amount is staggering, and the amount is corresponding more or less to what I had aired between 600,000 800,000 in order to fulfill the tasks that are the strict minimum, by the way. And then the second point is that he gave a certain number for mobilized people. 55,000 of the mobilized troops have been either killed or discharged. 41,000 have returned to Russia, so they have been discharged probably with serious injuries or simply unable to perform in any kind of capacity, or simply discharged. There are many ways, but most of the time it's serious injury or a decision made by the health commission or the people who are managing the unit. And then if we take out of those 55,000, 41,000, we see that we have 14,000 that are not returning, which is unfortunately a huge problem. It's 14,000 mobilized people killed. This corresponds roughly with 55% of the numbers on Poterinet. So it's about 45% of the mobilized that haven't been found out by obituaries and so on. The losses per se are rather small. It means that about 35 mobilized persons per day have been losing their lives. Mobilization started the 22nd. The first ones that we know of were killed around the 10th of October 2022. So basically, yes, it means that we have to count 14 months of mobilization. That also means that the losses for the mobilized do not represent, according to the British numbers, or even the American numbers, by the way, doesn't matter, do not represent the brunt of the punishment. But let's go a bit beyond that. This was just an introduction note on why I have more material and why I want now to do a more thorough analysis of the claims by both the Brits and the Americans. First of all, let's clear out something. I do not believe that the number of losses is completely accurate, but I do not believe that the number of losses is completely out of the ballpark. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, for people who have followed the saga of the alleged guesstimated, sucked from one's thumb losses on the Russian side, you would know that these have been fluctuating so hard At some point, we're already at 200,000, and it came back to 120,000, then it went back to 188,000. Then we had a huge surge of losses during the summer when the New York Times posted a supposedly not leaked information, but confidence from a US official that said 120,000 Russians killed and between 170 and 180,000 wounded, for a round total of 300,000 people dead. And then the same official said that on the Ukrainian side, it was 70,000 killed and 100 to 120,000 wounded, for roughly 170 to 190,000 casualties. At that time, I said that it looked a lot like a cope for the Ukrainian side, that they had to window dress the losses on the Ukrainian side by adding that extra padding layer of Russian orcs died, because that's the whole point here. The whole point is not to tell the world that Ukraine is actually losing, despite everything that is showing. Now, fast forward, we are at roughly December. The 4th of December was the first, I'd say, cues from the UK Ministry of Defense, who said that 70,000 Russians were killed, and in total, about 325,000 on average were casualties. A few days later, we have a leak from the US saying that 315,000 Russian troops have become casualties in this war, which is blah, 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 87% of the forces they had prior that, blah, 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 blah. That's very good and fine. But in this, these milestones that we are citing right now, we had another issue, and those were the leaks by Lord Teixeira. Please, monkey, free my boy. I'm really 2 fingers away from doing a campaign to liberate the asshole. But basically, so the leaks show that there were, according to Mediazona, the extrapolation that Mediazona did, up to 43,000 Russians killed, and then up to roughly 180,000 wounded. So that's the funny part. We got already a discrepancy between the losses that were shown back in March, fast forward to August, because as you can see, based on what the US leaked, Russians have taken 0 real casualties, but everybody that has been a casualty on the Russian side from March to August were just killed. So they lost 43, 44 to 120, lost about 75,000, all killed, done, over. This, of course, there is no logic in here. There's no obvious explanation, except for, once again, just padding whatever narrative they want to do. But then we come to the other point. If we are at 120 killed, 120,000, how the fuck do the Brits come with 70,000? And it's not even 70,000 Russian military killed. It's 70,000 Russian military plus quote-unquote mercenaries from Wagner, which means that the Russian military itself has only lost 50,000. It's also in the report. I've already posted screenshots and shit like that. So how the hell does it even happen? So the Russian military itself, if we have to take the UK mode logic, would mean that they've lost around 50,000, and then in order to bridge the gap, they have like 1 per almost 6 wounded to dead. This, unfortunately, is not possible. That's one of the things that we have heard more and more from the Russian side, but also from the Ukrainian side. A lot of casualties become dead because there is inadequate healthcare support, trauma, injury, all this shit. I can post you the threads. So how the fuck do the Russians suddenly jump from 1 to 3, how it used to be back in February, March 2023, to 1 to 6 now? It's very simple. It's made up. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, we are brainstorming within the Team War Criminal group, and I explained that more or less last time how we do it, but how I personally do it actually. But if we analyze it properly, the Russian casualties are probably 1.21. That was the level that was scrapped from data from the hospitals in Rostov earlier in the war. So roughly around October 2022, the data was for one dead you had 2.21, 2.2, let's say 2.3 even if you want, wounded, which wasn't a good ratio overall, because that meant that you had a lot of dead people for a lot less wounded. But that also means that when you look it properly, if you got, as I said, 3 guys, you can have 2 wounded, 1 killed. It's a small number. Overall, your casualties are going to remain small. Is it problematic for the dead people? Of course, that's what I'm saying. But this is what I said as well. It made no sense uh, with regards to what was said by the UK and over time. So what happened? We also know that the numbers early on the war, until March actually 2023, it wasn't that early. We were mid-war more or less. Ukrainians had a casualty rate of 261 to 1. So basically 2.61 wounded for 1 killed. That was extremely close, and this is due to the fact that this war is being mirrored more or less. Russia has more capabilities, whatever you want, but they're squandering material. Ukrainians have less capability, but they're mostly squandering uh, manpower. So then we go somewhere else. We go to the most recent number that was given by Putin regarding the mobilized. And when you do the calculus, you are roughly at 2.8. I calculated 2.66, but I made a mistake because I calculated 15 to 40, but it's 14 to 41. So yeah, we are under 3 on mobilized, which technically should be less prepared. They have less training. They were supposed to have all these problems of supply and rotation. So if the mobilized have this 2.8 something, 2.9 even if you want, how the fuck do the Brits come up with a lost number of almost 6 on the Russian military? Of course, I'm not speaking about Wagner, because Wagner apparently was 1 to 2, was 20,000 killed, 40,000 wounded. Magic. On top of it, if we go, as I said, to match these numbers with known casualty sites, it looks like for a lot of people that the losses, the killed actually on the British announcement, are pretty on point. It should be indeed somewhere between 70 and 77,000 Russian killed. But it simply doesn't match with the number of wounded that we know of, and there is nothing there to prove that suddenly you have 3 times more wounded that survive. It's just not possible. Of course, the caveat is that you trust, you believe Putin's numbers, but in my opinion, for him to say that 55,000 were irrecoverables from the mobilization, the mobilized guys, I found that pretty believable, given how they were employed, and given how, despite the research for mobilized death from sites like Poterinet, Media Zona, and so on, we only find 7,300 mobilized killed. If really we're speaking about 20,000 mobilized, then it would be a problem to hide the rest. But right now, most of the mobilized are found. Okay, it's very close to 50-50, it's 55-45, but still. And if we have to extrapolate that with the troops that are already found, non-mobilized troops, of course, it's just simply impossible. It wouldn't fit even the best calculations on the US side. It would be 140,000 killed if you have to extrapolate. Nobody has gone there. Actually, everybody's going back, which is logical because the forces employed by both sides are reduced. We have spoken about this. Casualties are staggering for the forces employed, yes, but the forces employed are not that huge. We're not speaking millions. Both sides probably have a million troops, everything taken together, logistics, artillery, rear crews, whatever. And in a sense, you also can understand if Putin is 100% right that 600,000 plus Russian troops are in the special operations zone, then for sure Ukraine has a problem. I understand now why Ukraine has a problem. I personally, I was going with what the Ukrainians had said. So Smart TWK, Voices of the Army, now is becoming Angry Ukrainian, has said 440,000. I was roughly, I said 440, 450, which should be normal, even 500. But now we have an extra 117. This could be PR as well. And that's why I want to come to the fact that how the Russian side, being absolutely trash on PR for the whole war, with this interview, in my opinion, of course, has completely lopsided and turned this PR war around. And I'm going to express myself over that a bit later on the space, but right now the point is the following. How can the Russians suffer 120,000 killed in August and then 70,000 killed in December? No problem, could be a miscalculation, bad estimates, and so on. But if we have to trust the Americans themselves, we have 300 casualties in August and 315 in December. So basically from August to December, that's 4 months more or less, right? 4 months, 15 plus casualties means a bit less than 4,000, 3,600 something per month, right? Right. Then the 18 previous months, we have 300,000 casualties, which is over 16,000. It's 16.7 thousand a month. How can you explain the discrepancy? Okay, we can explain it by the fact that indeed in 2022 the front was large, a lot of troops, a lot of chaos, so you're gonna have a lot of casualties. The problem though is that the front is shorter since January. That's why I used the 1st of January to extrapolate the losses on both sides and say that proportionally one side had performed better than the other. Actually, both had performed worse given the reduced fronts, but Ukrainians had performed worse than the Russians. And here we have something even more stupid from the US Western propaganda, is that they want us to believe that during the 4 more difficult months, so end of counter, August, September, start of the Russian offensive in Avdiivka, but everywhere else, because that's the funny thing. We are seeing now the results. They are fucking moving everywhere. And it's insane. It's not the early war, of course. It's not February, March. But for the kind of positional warfare that we had, it's insane right now, especially direct towards Kurakove and Ugledar. they're making strides. Bakhmut, of course, and Avdiivka, the encirclement is ongoing. So the problem that we have right now is the following. During the hardest month of the war, you are telling us that in Avdiivka alone, in 2 months, they lost 13,000 fucking killed. But that's from 10th of October to 10th of December. What happened the 2 previous months? Only 2,000 casualties? So this is the insane, completely insane public relations campaign that the Americans, the Brits, and everyone else had probably built up for a while. And they know that this is bullshit. The fact that they come out with this nonsense and they give you the 87% numbers, it doesn't matter. It has no point. It has no merit. I'm not even saying that the number is wrong. The narrative is completely fucked up. You go in 4 months from 300 to 315,000. Wow, great. But when you do the analysis I told you, you go from 16,000 per month to 3,600 per month. Negro, how the fuck's wrong? What's going on with you? And this is the whole point that we are keeping. That I wanted to convey to you yesterday. The West has lost the plot. They have lost the Ukrainian plot. I don't know if it's self-aware. I don't know if there's something that's going on there. I don't know if they're in disarray. I don't know if there is anything else that we don't know. I hope it's a ploy, because at least it would make things a bit more interesting, and I wouldn't lose faith in the fact that the West is this huge foe that is going to kill everybody and destroy everything. Because right now they look like fucking a king without clothes, an emperor without clothes. You can see it openly in almost everything they're saying. You got this announcement of 1 billion this, 1 billion that, but then you see what they are providing. I'm not saying the stock numbers and everything. I'm saying what they are producing, what are the orders. I mean, the Germans are fucking happy to give 200,000 rounds a year to Ukraine. Like, what the hell, man? The Americans are happy they're going to make 600,000 rounds all year this year, 2024. I'm like, what the fuck? What's going on? This PR is shitty. They're having fights for nonsense. I mean, honestly, if you are invested into Ukraine winning or whatever, you wouldn't treat Ukraine the way you're treating it. Zelensky went twice to beg for everybody. Zelensky right now has become that parliamentary CEO, manager, who is trying to beg everybody to trust him one last time, because this time he's going to turn the fortunes around. And for the US lawmakers right now, it's literally any kind of foreign policy issue. They probably do care, actually, but they don't care that much to go beyond their partisan lines, especially with the logic of the elections coming for 2024. And on the other side, you got Monkey, confident, toasting with people from the DNR, getting stupid questions live on TV and replying to them, and also taking the strength. I mean, could you imagine? And once again, I'm not leonizing the goddamn asshole. I know you're not gonna like it, but I'm not leonizing him. I think that a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of Russian hubris was there as well. But right now, what he did, the power move that he does, that literally goes out and gives numbers. You can believe them or not, it doesn't really matter. The guy goes out there and said 50,000, 55,000 of mobilized are not dead or severely injured. Point on the line. Go on. What you gonna do? Is Zelensky going to say that? Zelensky cannot even afford to say how much fucking posthumous awards he has given. He cannot afford that shit, because it would belie his bullshit about only 15,000 casualties. The Ukrainians are communicating so badly right now. It's amateur hour. These guys that were mocking the dragon teeth defenses on the Russian side, they are building them now in Sumy and Chernigov, and you're like, what the fuck? I thought it was a joke. And on top of it, they're doing it in the winter. So if the Russians want to look what's going on in the region, it's perfect for them. I mean, the brain dead reaction, the lack of responsibility on the Ukrainian side is staggering. And you see the way how Zelensky is moving around. He's moving around like an idiot. He's being literally ping-ponged, and it doesn't matter. He's trying to pledge his cause and like, oh, please, guys, give me something. You remember the give us credit joke and meme. And Americans are like, oh, we need to help Israel first, and if you need stuff for Israel, 50 billion, go, man. And I mean, whoever in Ukraine is watching this and watching their president that was supposed to be a world leader, the guy with the cojones, and suddenly this dude is forced to beg. And on the other side, you see Putin smiling, completely in control, at least in appearance. Arestovich said it better, like, who's winning, man? They pushed the bullshit to make the screens in yellow and blue. And Putin said some things that, of course, are pure PR. We're not stupid. But who the fuck, after all the bullshit and all the nonsense, all the trash that Ukrainians have posted online, have mocked the Russians, have terrorized the Russians, goes on and say it's a civil war, we're brother against brother. Like, the master stroke on his PR is beyond everything right now. And it might sound cheesy, crusty, whatever you want to call it. It's there, it's a fact. This son of a bitch is doing exactly what he should have done the first day. Instead of going with his nonsense about we're going to force the Ukrainians to abandon every hope before even fighting the war. That was bad. It has to be said. If we see what they really can do with a little bit of mobilization, I'm not even speaking about putting everything. No, that was bad. Now there is this questioning: were they surprised of how the Ukrainians defended themselves, or was it a kind of controlled descent into the war we have right now? But that controlled descent went out of hand. I suspect that it was that case. I suspect that they always had a B plan, but it went sideways because they weren't ready for the B plan. But now we are the B plan, and we are looking at it from a very nasty perspective, where losses are staggering, accumulating on both sides. But this, as you know, plays on the hands of Russia, not Ukraine. And we see them suddenly moving 2 kilometers in directions they couldn't dare even like go beyond the direct front line 2-3 months ago. And now the question is, what happened? And if something happened that we don't know, why the Western press and Western PR is so bad and keep going with this narrative, that's not going to solve your problems. And the thing is, when you analyze a lot of articles that are coming out, the blame game, who were blaming Zelensky for overselling the situation, overselling the victories, overselling the status. I mean, by heart, I can tell you the nonsense bullshit that we had in September, October, November 2022, when, as I told you last time, they had far more tanks that Russians had in Ukraine because they captured that much, far more artillery rounds and ammunition because they captured that much, far more artillery systems because they captured that much. And you're like, what happened? Ayo, Mikola, what happened? And what happened is the following: all that bullshit, all that bluster, worked because the Russians both were defeated in some areas, but on the other side accepted shamelessly to get taunted and ridiculed, but to be able to fight another day. And this is that other day. And that other day is going to become a week, guys. And I swear to God, I hope Ukrainians are ready. Because it's going to become THD all the way. The way that Putin kept this nonsense about denazification, demilitarization, whatever you want to call it, to us that are following the war from the beginning, this can mean only one thing. That motherfucker is going to go full war until the Ukrainians tap out or are defeated de facto. Right now, Ukrainians do not seem to tap out. They want more money, they want more weapons, they want more artillery, whatever. And it's logical. Whatever losses they have right now might even be reversible, but they're not precluding them from having a more or less survivable country, functional one. Of course, it's going to be a problem without 70% of the Black Sea coast, but it's not the worst. The real big issue right now is what if indeed, because Putin said something else, Odessa is a Russian city, that means no fucking negotiations. No deal. There will be a deal and probably Odessa will not be given. That's my feeling. I'm sorry for you guys. But that communication, Odessa is a Russian city, that means no deal, no negos, whatever you want to do, you're going to take it. And the whole point now is to see what the West is going to do. And as I said yesterday, my two wagers are that the Russians are going to replace slowly the FPV by something a lot more foolproof, let's say it like this. So let's see how well it goes with the new Lancets. The FPV, more and more I'm seeing, as I said yesterday, I'm seeing more and more intercepted, jammed, lost. And I said yesterday, I believe it's one FPV out of two that finds its target, which is both extremely problematic because they launch both sides probably at least 100 FPVs to each other a day. And at the same time, I find that it's awful that a weapon system is failing 50%, especially if it's the only thing that you can employ without risking a lot more guys in the back with the artillery tube or on a plane, whatever you want to call it. So my wager was that the FPV either is going to be rationalized, streamlined, and hardened against electronic warfare, either something else going to come that's going to be like the FPV but not an FPV. And the second part, as I said yesterday, is that I think the Russians should either refuse to go on with this current system on the company. They should have either fewer platoons but larger in number, or fewer platoons with the same kind of numbers that I have right now. That would go towards a extra company. Because right now this is the biggest problem I think that the Russians have. There's a on small tactical movements and combats. There is on the side of the officers, there is this inertia when at least one platoon doesn't do anything, because it depends on the type of CO that you have. If your company commander is good, your company is going to be good enough. But if it's bad, that means that the 120, 150 guys are going to fucking sit there and be condemned because your leadership is shitty. And that's what I'm saying. More companies would allow for more leadership, would allow for sometimes more capacity unlocked, let's say it like this, because the more I'm going through the Russian telegrams, and the more I'm seeing that it's really, really, really localized. Some guys are good, some guys are bad, some guys are better, some guys are worse. It's logical, like in every I'd say institution, large institution. But in this case, let's be honest, it needs to change. That's my opinion. The same way that the BTG need to go up, uh, the same way the smaller units need to be more flexible. I already said that. More flexibility, but higher echelon, rather than smaller unit, but with more centralization. This is something that I'm seeing from the combats on the ground. I'm seeing more and more small units on the Russian side having a lot more success than larger units being a lot more problematic. I don't know if you saw, there is a video of a potential storming from November, end of October, November, from 106. They go with M113, and Ukrainians go in the trench, and usually that kind of videos ends up with Russians all dead or captured, whatever. They cut the video short, and you see that Ukrainians are bunched up way too much on one side of the trench, and the Russians are hitting back. And this is the thing I was going to say. You can see that a leaner unit on a lower tactical level is going to be a wager, of course, because if you start losing your guys, your unit's going to get finished off faster. But it gives you more flexibility. I spoke about this during the month of June, July, when I said that before that you had smaller units per trench, and then at some point they were easier to take out of trenches because they were like between 6 and 10 guys, instead of being 40 in a bigger trench and then distribute the effort accordingly. Some videos are actually proving it. I posted a video from the 291 where they were like 10 guys taking back the trench and then moving up to the next trench. This is the thing I say. Tactically, I think the Russians are finding the perfect spot from their assault detachments towards their support / defense detachments. This is the thing that I think the Russians are going towards something far more workable for the year 2024. Now, the second part of it was a thorough analysis about the claim that the Russians were going back 18 years. I said it last time, but apparently the record went off, or I don't know what happened, so I'm going to repeat myself. 18 years ago, most of the Russian army didn't have thermals. 18 years ago, most of the Russian army didn't have FPVs. They didn't have multiple systems that today allow them to be a lot more efficient than even 2022. 18 years ago, the Russian army didn't have all the electronic warfare elements that it has today. And especially now that we're having, with the risk of localized drones on every level, from the fire team to the battalion, we have more and more tools. The Sputnik made a presentation about this tool that is going to be mass distributed to the troops. I feel a little bit of a scam there, because the moment it becomes official, the fact that you need to rationalize production, streamline it, means that a lot of things may get fucked up. But anyway, the Russian army as it stands right now is not going 18 years back. It has more troops, it has more readiness, is spending more. And this is normal. In wartime, when you focus on your war, you are going to develop a lot of things that you didn't have before. And as I said, they are using a lot more PGMs. They are getting a lot better in cooperating on the three levels, so artillery, reconnaissance, and exploitation. Is completely different. They also have a better understanding of almost everything. If you start looking at how the Russian and Ukrainians, because it needs to be said, both sides are learning. I honestly, I pity the assholes if Russia ends up gobbling Ukraine and Ukrainians begrudgingly make some kind of peace and get enlisted in this, let's say, imperial Russia-Ukrainian army. I pity the fools because it would be a fusion of both sides. And Ukrainians got pretty far also in how they use the drones, artillery, and so on. So both sides are getting pretty top notch in a lot of areas, and most of the European armies are going to get fucking smashed. They just don't have that experience, of course, for those who survive on both sides once again. And of course, you got this problem that on both sides, you got one big brother that has the recipes, the Chinese for both sides, and the US for the Ukrainian side. So all these things make sure that, in fact, Russia is going forward. Also, Russia, for the first time, has faced Western threats all over the place. West had faced mostly, okay, degraded, old export variant, call it as you wish, but had faced piecemeal Russian/Soviet assets. Russian rarely had anything else but token weapons, like in Syria, that were the TOWs and stuff like that. But now it's almost the full gamut. We've had Atacams, okay, older ones, HIMARS every time. We got artillery, volcano rounds, Excalibur rounds, bonus rounds, smart rounds, PKW rounds, harm. We've had brimstones. We had gay blade, 300 gay blade, 600. There is now a lot of the arsenal procurement from NATO that is being used against Russia. And especially on the artillery side, I really, because the Russians were complaining about this, I really thought that the Russians couldn't cope. At some point, we're going to break on the range. Quite the contrary. They just fucking took it. And then suddenly they started using the Lancets. They didn't have a Lancet 18 years ago. UMPKs, of course, as I said last time, they had gliding bombs, actually perfect shape, quote unquote, gliding bombs, not ghetto rigs that I have right now. No problem. As I said, thermals on tanks, starting to equip the tanks with localized electronic warfare against FPVs, spectrum analyzers. If you see the guys who go into assault or even who defend on the Russian side, those are not equipped like they were equipped during the Chechen War. Of course, it's still hodgepodge, but both sides are hodgepodge because the level of troop investment, it is how it is. Sights are almost in every weapon on both sides. Okay, the Mobics don't seem to have them, especially on the Ukrainian side. I posted some shitty things, but soon enough they also start mounting them on the sides. It's a completely different war. So the Americans they're coming 18 years back in their modernization. I'm like, bro, I mean, this is actually, of everything that was claimed in that article, this is the least believable. And this is where we are. That's why I'm complaining this much about the PR losing its step on the PR on the Western side. I don't understand it. I don't know, because I said something about even Zelebobic when he said Russia hasn't conquered any single thing in Ukraine. Bro, you lost Bakhmut. You lost a shit ton of small villages around Zaporozhye as preparation for the counter, because the Russians finally did something logical. You lost some of the ground that you had gained through the Kharkov offensive. You were pushed back. You lost Marinka, biggest PR in this fucking war. You're gonna lose Avdiivka for sure. I have no doubt about it. It's going so much worse everywhere. If things go as bad as I hope they will go for Ukraine, You're gonna lose probably Kurakove. But in this year, you lost a couple of big names: Soledar, Bahmut, Ozerovka, Kudmirovka. We can start, having names. And what did Ukraine do? Out of the 14 villages that they're freed, they're gonna lose, what, 4? Like, this is where we are right now. It's fucking madness, and I don't understand why is it this mad. Why these people are so fucking mad. It's one thing to get ass blasted. I understand you're losing a war, and it's a war that's gonna cost you a lot, especially Ukrainians, because that's the funny thing. For right now, Putin says one thing, but I can promise you, the moment Zelebobic signs the capitulation and the cessation of territory, shit is gonna go fucking sideways in those areas. And before that, you're gonna have also some very quirky demands from the Russian side. And I think a lot of guys who have opened their mouth, who've yapped, will probably have to move out. Like people like Madyar, the asshole Misyagin, all the crew behind the Kilpukin channel, all the assholes from Kraken and Azov, because the Russians are going to ask for them. So it's fine. I mean, to me, I don't care. If Ukraine wants to go there and have that humiliation, because I don't even think that the capitulation per se is going to be humiliating. It's logical. I mean, right now we are actually asking ourselves, if we are serious, what the fuck is Russia doing with still 20% of Ukraine? It should be 40. But overall, we're getting to this point where it is what it is. But Russia is going to prevail in the objectives that it wants to set to itself. Now, another very important point is what's going on with the West right now. And we can discuss once again. I had this lineup with Sharmuratov when it came to how much artillery rounds, because it's a stupid question, a stupid matter, but that's where exactly we are going to see the pushback from the West, Europe, America, whatever, to a partial mobilization, let's call it like this, like the Russians call it. When you see the order that have been already placed, we did this calculus, and we are roughly at 700,000 something, 724,000 rounds that have been ordered to be delivered from within 23 to 25 for some drafts. Germans have said they're going to drop 200,000 in 2024 for Ukraine. We know that the Finns have said they're going to double the production, but Namo Lapua is only going to be able to double its current production in 2027. Right now, the order for Ukraine is 109 million euros. So basically, in best case scenario, 109 million, 110 million are going to produce you about 55,000 rounds. Normally a lot less, because it's at least between 2.5 and 4.5 thousand euros. Depends what you want to do. The cost for Rheinmetall, for instance, was 4,300. The NATO spokesperson said that now it was $8,000 per round. I found that completely bullshit, but whatever. So all these things, when they pile up, we see that despite every single thing that has been said, without America, the West cannot do anything to help Ukraine in a systematical and profound fashion. If America doesn't move its ass, the West cannot give anything. Best the West can do right now, Europe can do, is maybe 100 more tanks, Leopard 2s. The Italians are surely not going to give their Arietes. French, of course, they thought about the nuclear, but they said, we don't have the capability to produce right now. and their next tank project is for 2032 at least. So the only person who can do anything is either Koreans produce K2 specifically for Ukraine. It's not going to happen because the Koreans do not want their product to get absolutely smashed, or second-hand shit from everywhere, including the US with the Abrams. But the US right now doesn't want to start remodernizing Abrams, open chains, and stuff like that. Not as much because they cannot do it, but because the Abrams tanks, as it stands right now, with its open bustle, its unprotected driver, the absolute incapacity of that tank to do anything without APU and its turbine, means that in case of FPV bonanza, artillery bonanza, ATGMs, whatever you want to call it, that tank's going to be out of combat pretty fast. And one of the biggest problems right now is that on top of the fact that the Abrams is heavy, is a very specific type of tank with a very specific logic behind it, as I said, given that 90% of its ammunition is in the bustle, despite the protection, it's only one lancet away from being irrelevant each and every time it's going to be employed. And the other big problem is for the Americans, they cannot deploy anything without the Russians knowing the last 5 to 10 kilometers. If something else what they can do about it, I can agree with you. But this is the thing right now. On both sides, while there is a superiority in persistent ISR on the American side, on localized tactical ISR, there is complete parity. Both sides are going to know what the other side is doing, with outliers, of course, but most of the time, that's why you have the current quote-unquote stalemate. Now, one last thing I wanted to add, and that thing is the current successes. I mean, especially south of Marinka, southwest of Marinka is going completely wild. I don't fucking understand what's going on. In Gorlovka, the Gagarin heap was taken back. So once again, the PR from the Ukrainians completely out of sync. And we are expecting to see how the Russians are going to deal with Chasov Yar in Bakhmut and what they want to do. There was an attack with Russian troops entering Klishivka from the south of it. Apparently, they got a bit mauled by hate drops from the Ukrainian side. I'm sorry to announce you bad news, but the logic is that they're there. They're already moving on. Honestly, I pray for whoever is defending in that area in Klishivka to either move away or stay there, but they're not gonna get any kind of quarter. We saw that with the small kerfuffle that happened in Pobieda, south of Marinka, when the guy was literally ambushed outside of his dugout and just killed. And it's going to be like this for a lot of things, guys. I know that it's not always pleasant, but the Russians are at that point right now. So a lot of scenes that you saw all over the summer with people getting captured alive and stuff like that, I think that thing's not going to happen that much anymore. And we already have the Ukrainians complaining about the war crimes, war crimes. So yeah, that's the funny part, guys. War is turning, war is changing, and I think the attitude on the Russian side, the Russian leadership side, is a clear sign that it's going where they want it to go. How long, how, etc., we don't know. And honestly, I'm telling you, let's enjoy the moment, see how it goes, and then tomorrow we're gonna have the post Avdiivka thread, and I'm gonna have a bit more time to discuss. This was literally a second take of the express space that I did yesterday. So I'm really sorry if it's a bit short. If you want to intervene right now, it's up to you guys. As usual, ask for your time on air, and then I'm giving you and I'm answering you. So please. Okay, like yesterday, apparently nobody wants to intervene. No problem, guys. If you want, you can. Oh, okay, of course. Okay, Burmese, it's up to you, man. Yes,
Hello.
yes,
Long
hello.
time no, long time no see. But I think I'm not going to really ask a question here, but maybe give my two cents.
No
I
problem.
think at best we are in this point that where casualties at the very best can be considered comparable, like as an equivalent. But maybe it's slowly changing on, and I think I have told you before that that maybe in Zaporizhian offensive and that counter-offensive and this Avdiivka defense, maybe Ukrainians took way more losses than they are willing to admit, and I think that is why we are seeing Russians taking more and more region without too many losses. Like where we used to, we are kind of used to 50 meters, 100 meters advance. Now we are seeing at least in one region, even advances going up to a kilometer or two. So maybe we are going in that point where Ukrainians are losing most of their advantages while Russians, whatever disadvantage they are having, they are slowly bringing up it, coming to parity with it, or whichever, wherever they had advantage, they are trying to maximize it. Thanks.
Completely agree with you, and it has been a long-stand principle of mine. At some point, the Ukrainians, as you said, every kind of advantage they had tactically and also strategically is going to be either matched up or leveled up from the Russians. And one of the biggest levelers in here, I think, is the FPV, in the sense that tactically it allowed the Russians, especially in Zapo, to completely overwhelm the Ukrainian thrust without having to every time use the Lancets. And it was cheap, easy, quote unquote, to train people on. And actually, it's a bit backfiring in a sense because the Ukrainians themselves are also not trying to do exactly what the Russians did to them in Zapo. So
And
yeah, I agree
I
with
would also add, say that key UMPK kits have really saved Russian Air Force, and I think it's only going to go worse for Ukrainians with this part.
Yeah, I agree with you. UMPK actually
And
has allowed the Russians to replicate, quote unquote, in a certain way what the Ukrainians were doing with the HIMARS. That I agree with that.
also, I would say that now Russians have got the ability to drop multiple UMPKs. So this will definitely not help them either, like the Ukrainians, because now Russians can either drop more payload or at the same time, or they can do that on-call
Yep.
cap, if you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
say that.
I understand you 100%. I agree with that, and I 2000% agree with that. And that's the funny part. I think the at the beginning everybody was mocking the way the UMPK looked like. I don't think they're mocking it
Uh,
anymore.
it's not about like mocking because people said like the construction, and even I kind of mocked it, like it was made by some Vanya and Kostya, but I never really did it on its usage, like capabilities, and we can really see that it's doing as good job as ER would have done
Yeah,
in
yeah,
ideal
yeah.
cases. So
Completely agree.
and as they say, though I'm not engineer, but engineers say, right, if it looks stupid, but if it works, it's not stupid.
Completely agree with you.
I think also that I think Ukrainians are probably taking more and more losses, but admission will take way more time than we will like it to know. Like at this point, not I'm saying the total war. This may be a bit of my controversial take.
No, 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 man. I honestly, that's one thing that I'm over with because I was trying to convince everybody that, guys, last year I know that a lot of people were maybe not trashing me, but were like, isn't this cope? When I was saying that, guys, is gonna turn around, not because Russians are infallible or whatever, but simply because there is that much staying power on whatever they had as industrial capability. which is also, I have said it last year, I'm going to say it this year as well, is still insufficient for what they actually need to do with what they have. But right now, just that steamroller for the state that the Ukrainian armed forces are now is effectively ongoing. And if it can be even funnier with help from North Korea and who knows who else, Iran, of course, but I'm aiming at China here. Uh, well, we are on to a very difficult, very challenging, very destructive 2024. As I said last time, it's going to be a very bloody year, and it's going to be where the Ukrainians are going to break, or something's going to happen which is going to put the war into a freezer, and that would be not the best way to end the war as it stands, because it means that it's going to be around three, around four, call it as you wish. But probably, if Russia is to the point where they start doing 10 kilometers all front per day, then yeah, honestly, I think at that moment the Americans would have to do something, whatever it is.
Uh,
Yes,
may I have to also probably say that there is Americans raising alarm that the Russians are able to restock their missiles much faster than they thought, and they are able to. I'm thinking that Russia might keep some of it in case if you may have already taken that US might intervene. So
yeah, yeah, but
keeping it for that rainy day.
yeah, but as I said, the problem with the U.S. intervention at that point is that it would have to be visible, because
Yeah,
even
like how do you intervene when you have no army to hide
if
behind on?
so, they're gonna have to wait. They're gonna have to wait for a while before being able. That's why I say that 2024 is gonna be interesting, because but the first, I don't see the Americans do anything of that kind of caliber within the first 6 months. So if the situation gets out of hand, then maybe we can see some things. But that would also mean that a lot of troops that are in Europe actually would have to be put together and dropped in select areas. That would mean something around 20 to 30,000 American troops. Not enough to do a lot of damage, but enough to start a far different type of war with far more unpredictable consequences. Let's say it like this. So yeah, if everybody wants to intervene, guys, don't stay shy. Don't be shy. Just tell me if you want. Otherwise, yeah, it's gonna be as usual. I'm gonna thank you for being on this short space. And tomorrow, roughly around 5 to 6 CT, if everything goes fine, and we can find some quiet place to actually do a kind of new, I'd say, experience. We'll be with Chadi somewhere in Belgium to convey our how can I say this, our feelings about the current shit show, and also to start trolling people all over around. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day, and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.